farm, if the farm's not productive, it's not producing, it's not making money. South Africa had about 179 million living chickens in South
That's
Africa.
ridiculous, man. Say, from fork to table. It's not
That's
that
just
far.
poor, that's just poor culinary manners right there.
Hey guys, welcome back to the High Level Podcast. Thank you again for joining us this week. I'm joined as always by my master of mechanical engineering, Mr. Damon Hunselaar. How are you this week, kind sir?
I'm doing very well. And yourself, Mr. Delport, how are you?
I'm doing good, eh? I'm doing good. We are 1 week out from the Soweto Marathon. Just so everyone knows, in 1 week, we might or might not be better than everyone else in the world.
Yeah, we will evolve.
Yeah.
Whether that's up or down is a different thing. But
It's a different story. How's the training going? Are you feeling confident?
I could run a marathon.
It's going to be tough, man. It's going to be...
I'm just going to trust that I did the best that I could to prepare. And whatever happens afterwards, happens afterwards.
Could you have done better? That's the question.
It's all determined anyway.
It's all determined. All the
I
things
prepared
I've been
as much
watching
as
and
I
the
was
things...
always to prepare.
Yeah, no, fair enough. All the things I've been watching is that, what do they say? The first 32 kilometers is like the warm-up and the last 10 kilometers is the race. So that's sort of the format I'm going in with. I don't know if you're taking the same philosophy here.
I am just trying to finish.
Just trying to finish. I'm just hoping I feel fresh. Anyway, guys, for those of you who want to follow us, we will be doing the Soweto Marathon next week. That'll be, the 3rd? Is it the 3rd or the 4th?
Yeah, it'll be the 3rd of November.
The 3rd, the Sunday. So yeah, we will take you guys along on our journey. Anyway, if you guys are new to the podcast, this is an engineering podcast. We are mechanical engineers and we bring mechanical engineering closer to the public to try and, open up a few of people's minds, their eyes, and just educate a little bit. That's our way of giving back, right? I don't know what you do it for. Maybe you do it for the clout, Mr. Hunselaar. I'm not too sure. Just for the fame and fortune.
For the learning experience and the lacquer chats.
And the lacquer chat. Speaking of that, let's get right into this week's episode. This is your week's episode, Mr. Hunselaar. Do you want to take us into this? Give us the intro. Give us the hard facts.
Okay, so this week we're going to talk about sustainable agriculture. In the past, we've spoken a lot about electric vehicles. We've spoken about power generation. But at the end of the day, one of the things that everybody needs, whether you're here or there, rich or poor, whatever, everyone needs to eat. Everybody. And for a growing population, we need to make sure that we're providing enough food for what we need right now, but also that we're not depleting all our resources for future generations to come. And like with modern agricultural techniques, there's a lot of risks, and some of these risks include topsoil depletion, groundwater contamination, degradation of rural communities, also increased production costs as you need to cater to a bigger population. You're going to need more resources.
Makes sense,
and then also there's poor conditions for farm workers. So we've got to look at, how can we make sure they're having a lacquer time? And then another important thing is greenhouse emissions. Did you know that 26% of global greenhouse... 20%.
I'm sorry, 20%. Yeah.
I'll climb through the screen and slap you. So did
Now
you
go
know
for it.
that greenhouse gas emissions account for 26 of the global greenhouse gas emissions generated in the world?
26 or 20? Just 26 of the greenhouse gases? Or is it 26%?
26%
I hope
of
you know.
global greenhouse gas emissions are generated by the agricultural sector.
I'm keeping this all in the YouTube video, just so you know, just because it's fun for me.
Fair enough.
That's a lot, eh? A quarter of the global greenhouse gas emissions. That's crazy.
Yeah, and the last risk I have here is that it uses a large amount of land, and we need that land. So here we go.
I think you put later on in the docu to all those stats you put for me for South Africa. Well, I can't remember what. I guess we'll get to it. But we use a lot of land for farming, eh? Gee whiskers, I was a bit shocked. I don't know if when you found that stat you were shocked.
I know, I was shocked. It's a lot of land.
Yeah, no, it's a ton of land. But anyway, so interesting, Mr. Hunselaar. So obviously we're talking farming and stuff, and we all know food's important. But how complex is the system? I think is where we should start. So obviously food supply chain. What's the story? What's the high level on food supply chain here?
So when we're talking food supply chain, we're talking from farm to fork, where we're planting the stuff and where we're planting the things and the animals are growing, to when we process the foods, to when we sell them, to when it gets to your plate. That when we refer to the food supply chain, that's what we're talking about. And really, when COVID hit, that's when I think we always knew it was important, but I think at that point it was really highlighted. Because I think there's a nice stat here where I don't know if it's nice, but it's a stat. So it says food insecurity increased by 38 and 44% in Kenya and Uganda respectively, and that in both countries regular fruit consumption decreased about 30% compared to the normal pre-epidemic period.
That's crazy, because that stat was wild to me, because they were just looking at before COVID and after COVID in that study I found. And to see, like, I know it was bad. I even remember it. I remember us, like, when you went to the shops, which you weren't allowed to do, well, it was sort of a grey area. We went to the shops. I've never seen, like, Checkers and Pick and Pay and stuff. There was, like, no food. Like, it was weird. Did you go to the shops when we were in lockdown? Well, in lockdown. Do you remember that?
Not so much, really. Not so much.
Gee whiz, man. It was scary. Is it? It was like super scary. So that stat of just to see like regular fruit consumption in those countries decreased by 30%. Like it's just because people couldn't get fruit. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, COVID was a real wake up call, I think, for everyone on food security.
Yeah. So about 25% of the world's population is directly involved in agriculture, with the highest agriculture rates in the world being in Burundi, which is 92.02% of the population involved in agriculture, and in Nepal, 65%. So that's like basically almost everyone in the country working in agriculture.
Yeah, well, 9 out of 10 people, if you're at a cocktail party, most likely they're all farmers. If you're going to cocktail parties in Burundi, do you attend lots of cocktail parties?
Only on the weekends.
Only on the weekends. I think this one was interesting as well. So obviously those are smaller countries. As you go to bigger countries, it's still a large portion of people. In India, about 42% of people are involved in agriculture. And in China, 1 in 4 people, 25% of people involved in agriculture. So basically, I think big point from this, a lot of people are involved in agriculture. And I think this involves from supply chain, like you say, from fork to table. Like there's a lot of people involved in the supply chain.
You mean from farm to fork?
Sorry, what did I say? From fork to table. It's not
that's
that
just
far.
That's just poor culinary manners right there.
Fair enough. Shocking.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's carry on there. So interesting to see how many people are involved in agriculture. And I think it was very interesting to see how things got affected during the pandemic. Obviously, we all went through it. It's very recent, so let's go through a bit here. I found this little stat from April of 2020, and this was specifically on US households. So during the pandemic, when we had the lockdown, I'm not sure when America locked down, but we locked down in about March-ish of 2020, if I remember right. But this stat taken in April of 2020, 35% of US households with children under 18 years old found that they were food insecure when the lockdown started. So like a large portion of people, and when I was reading this paper, I didn't put in all the stats here, but a lot of it was in the poorer range of people, so middle class and a bit down to the bottom, just showing that people aren't prepared for if there was a pandemic and there's a food shortage, and just how important like the food supply chain actually is to us as human beings. I think it was especially highlighted that if there's not food in the shops, we as modern people don't know what to do. Like a lot of us don't grow our own food. I don't know if you grow your own food at home, but I mean, like a lot of people don't know how to grow food. If it's not at Checkers or at Pick and Pay, we're a bit screwed. So again, the food supply chain, very important. We also have a lot of human resource labor constraints, especially during the pandemic. People couldn't go to work, so they couldn't physically work on farms, which obviously put a lot of pressure on the supply chains. We had lots of bottlenecks in processing, and we had grocery stockpiling. So people who maybe saw the pandemic coming or as lockdown started went and just bulked up on food. Food, toilet paper. I remember toilet paper was a thing, but lots of people bulking up on it. Then there's no more food for the rest of the people in the country. So yeah, it was a very interesting time during the pandemic.
Yeah, and I think another quite a serious challenge, and we know that in South Africa we're having a bit of a water challenge. So in agriculture, obviously you need to water things, so it's very important that we have a reliable water supply. So one big problem is droughts, and so globally, it's been estimated that droughts and heat can reduce crop production by approximately 10% nationally. So
Sure.
just because you go through a drought, you can't produce as much food, and
Makes
that
sense.
creates water scarcity. And I think in South Africa, well, while we've established that Eskom is doing a better job now, there's
Much
still
better
some
now. Much better.
unreliability in the electricity grid can also cause challenges. And you know, and
100%.
despite all of these challenges, the agricultural sector is still expected to provide enough food to eradicate hunger. You know, just because we're going through tough times doesn't mean we can just
Doesn't mean
not
you can rest.
produce too much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, they're expected to prevent billions of people from going hungry, and now recently they're also expected to protect the environment at the same time. All important things, you know.
Yeah.
And then in the 2020 UN Food and Agriculture Report, I think it's the 2020, it could be 2021. Uh, they said that 8.9% of the global population are going hungry, and that's
Sure.
about 690
That's
million
rough.
people. And that's
Yeah.
an increase over 5 years of 60 million people. That's almost our South Africa's entire population. That's how much more people
insane.
are going hungry. And they
Sure.
estimated that by 2050, food production will need to increase by 70% to be able to feed a population of 9 billion people. And then
70%.
yeah. But according to the Worldwide Fund for Nature, South Africa will need, so that 70% is a global thing.
Yes.
But for
yeah.
South Africa, the Worldwide Fund for Nature said that we need to produce 50% more than what we're producing now to be able to support our population in 2050. And we're going to
That's
have an
insane,
estimated
yeah.
population of 73 million people.
That's
So, I mean,
insane.
when you, that's big numbers we're talking, eh?
No, it's
It's
massive. I mean, to increase 70% in, let's call it 25 years, that's a lot of food to produce. Sorry, just on this point, so I watched a video before we came on here. It was I don't know, there was a whole bunch of farmers talking. And it was one lady farmer, she produces bell peppers for like the shops, Checkers
Yeah.
and Pick and Pay and Woolworths and all of that. And she was just saying it's fine and she runs a successful farm. But in order for her to comply with a whole bunch of things, so you need to comply with what the shops want. They come and they do their own audits. Like Woolworths has very different conditions that they want than Checkers and Pick and Pay. So they all have their own things that you must comply with and documentation and stuff. Then you have at the provincial level and at the national level things you have to comply with. Then there's things like processing things that you have to comply with. Then she's part of the global, there's some global agricultural procedures or something. She also has to comply with that. Then if she wants to supply like something that's organic, then she needs to comply with all of that. So she said, like, as a small farmer, it's so difficult if you want to grow higher priced crops or whatever, or organic crops. You simply don't have the funding or the time or the people to put the documentation in place just to sell something that you feel like is grown organically. So I feel like it's tough on farmers. And now you're expected to feed the population, feed the people who are now in poverty that we want to pull up, and you must be all sustainable and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a tough time for them.
Yeah, I think that's also another thing that, especially me, like you often forget about when you look at these problems, where it's not just a technical or a physical problem. There's social issues that go along with it. Like you say, you have to, if you want to sell what you call organic food, you have to be able to comply to certain regulations, and to get those certifications costs money.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think,
and
yeah.
time and people and expertise. Yeah, it takes a bit, eh? But yeah, I think let's talk South Africa, Mr. Insula. Take us into the stats around South Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, so South Africa has a pretty big agricultural sector.
Just a little bit.
I think we already know that. I mean, if you drive through to places, you'll see many maize fields. Yeah, so
100%.
South Africa has the largest agricultural land on the African continent, which means out of all the countries in Africa, South Africa has the most land that they use specifically for
farming.
agricultural.
That's
And
awesome.
as of
Jeez.
2020, this agricultural land accounts for 96 million hectares, and that's almost 80% of the total land area that we have going towards agriculture. And of those agricultural lands, 87% of these are classified as land under permanent meadows and pastures. So that means that land, we're not planting things and growing in them necessarily. That's going to be land that we use for letting the cows graze, letting the sheep graze on that land. Also, another thing is to grow grass and hay for animals
Yeah.
as well. So that's what that land is being used for. And about
Okay.
12.5% of that agricultural land is arable land, and that's land that we're able to grow things in. And in 2020, all of this land and all of this agriculture contributed about 2.8% of our total GDP.
Sure.
So I expected that to be higher, to be honest.
Yeah, no, like I guess because it's hard to quantify because maybe it's so cheap, so it doesn't necessarily equate, but it's important. You know what I mean? I think that to me is the crazy one. There, 12.5% of the land is arable, of the 80% of land that is for agriculture. That's a lot, eh? I mean, well, a little bit seems like to me the uneducated Neanderthal that I am. Only 12.5%. What's that? 1/8, one eighth of the land we use for agriculture is actually used for growing things.
Growing things.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
So I mean, what would you say we actually grow? I suppose you can see the document.
If I had to guess, no, I haven't read that part too intensely. I would assume a lot of maize, just because I know we do a lot of maize, corn, stuff like that. I don't know. Is there a difference between maize and corn? Am I uneducated? Somewhere there. Maize, corn, maybe wheat. Do we do a lot of wheat? Sunflowers? I don't know. I feel like I'm getting more uneducated as I keep guessing. Yeah.
If you go to Bethlehem, you'll see some sunflowers, but it's actually sugarcane. In 2022,
you see, I forgot about KZN. Damn it.
Yeah, in 2022, we produced 18 million metric tons of sugarcane. And then the second biggest crop size is the maize, which is about 16.1 million metric tons. So yeah, we produced that sugarcane, we produced that maize. But in 2024, corn was the crop that covered the largest land area out of all the crops.
Makes sense.
So yeah, and in 2023 and 2024, South Africa was among the 10 leading corn producing nations in the world.
At us. Top 10, my boys.
So, yeah, top 10, there we go. And yeah, so we have quite what makes South Africa's agricultural industry really, I would say, what's the word I'm looking for? Not applicable. Attractive.
Reverse. Attractive? Okay,
Attractive. Yeah. What makes the agricultural industry attractive in South Africa is that we are able to have a really diverse, assortment
set of things we produce. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's not just plants and stuff. In 2020, South Africa had about 179 million living chickens in South Africa.
That's ridiculous, man. That's crazy. Sure, but
did I ever tell you how long it takes for a chicken to go from being hatched to when they slaughter it and put it on the shelf?
No, you've never told me such things.
Really? 28
No,
days.
never. 28?
From when the egg hatches to when the chicken's mature enough to slaughter, about 28 days. So like a month.
That's not too bad, eh? Not too bad. For my KFC, why not?
Yeah. And then also, if we look at sheep and cattle, about 12.6 million and 12.3 million heads respectively in 2022.
Okay.
I don't know how long a sheep and cattle stay alive before.
Dude, I have no idea. Because I mean, you get a nice little veal. That's a few months, man. Just straight out there.
So animal products generated about 152 billion rand of income in South Africa in 2020.
Nice. Not too bad, eh?
So, yeah.
Not too bad.
And so when we look at South Africans at what we do, because we don't just produce the food for ourselves, for our own population, we also have quite a lucrative export and import industry. And South Africa's agricultural exports exceed its imports. So we're exporting more than what we're bringing in. So in 2020, we're feeding not just us, we're feeding the world. So I think that's also maybe why we have to produce 50%, even though we're only growing in population.
I hear you, because we're a net. Because we're a net exporter.
Exactly. So I mean, in 2020, exports reached to a value of $9.5 billion US dollars, but we imported about $5.3 billion US dollars worth of exports. And our leading exports are from in horticultural crops. That's horticultural crops were the leading exports of the industry with $5.4 billion US dollars. and that's going to include citrus things and grapes and apples. And then our main imports are things like cereals, like wheat and rice and oilseed, and that's about 1.2 billion US dollars, and 915 million US dollars respectively. And so since 2016, organic agriculture has followed an increasing trend. So what happened was, it seemed that from 2016, or at some point, we said, okay, we're going to start producing organic crops, and then we reached a maximum of 59,550 hectares of crops in 2000, and then that dropped, and we haven't gone to that point again, but we're getting there. And then of the organic crops, we're looking at things like cereals and grapes, which account for that. But one of the leading themes on our podcast is, the environment. How are we making this world a better place? And we often talk about like carbon and emissions and things like that. And when we look at South Africa is already a carbon intensive economy, and because we mainly rely on coal power. But a third of South Africans' carbon emissions comes from our food supply chain.
Yes, that's crazy.
Which is actually
Well, I guess it's all because that involves the trucks and the diesel that you use in the tractors and all the land use and water use. I'm sure it involves a lot of that.
So here's actually the interesting thing. The main cause of carbon emissions from the agricultural sector is fires.
Sure. Okay, that's interesting.
So that's that graph over there that I've put in. So they're saying that between 2015 and 2021, the carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere was between 1.9 and 3.6 megatons. Sure. And that's what that graph is showing there.
And that's
South
just
African cropland fires.
Yeah.
So South African cropland fires account for 2% of CO2 emissions globally, and that's specifically talking about crop fires. So out of all the crop fires in the world, 2% of those are from South Africa.
That's insane. Like, is it? Because don't we burn? We do controlled burns. Is that not good? Is this part of that? Is it like, do they randomly burst into flames? Like, I don't know.
I think that's part of it, but they say that other contributing factors are hot and dry weather, and also like a lot of wind in like the Western Cape.
Sense, I guess.
And there's a lot of wind. It just goes. I mean, do you remember that big fire that happened in Australia a couple of years back?
Yeah, no, that was rough, eh? Yeah. There's been a lot of fires in California as well. It's insane. Do you remember the Neisner fires? That was now recent, a few years ago. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah. No, you don't remember that.
Also, where Alet's parents stayed, there's like a couple of weeks ago there was a fire.
Yeah, they always having fires.
And like this one dude's like pen of sheep. Is it a pen of sheep? I don't know. They got stuck and he lost all of his sheep.
Oh no, Shaman. Oh yes, Shaman. That's rough. Eh?
Yeah. All so right. I think we've pretty much driven the nail in the coffin when we're talking about the agricultural sector, why it's important, why we need it to be sustainable. So 100%. I think now we're going to head into the part of the podcast where we talk about how are we as engineers and STEM and thinking people, how are we going to contribute to that? So I found an article by Damlin attractively titled "How Mechanical Engineers Are Shaping the Future of Agriculture," and it was really
that was pure clickbait for your mechanical engineering brain.
And you know what? It worked because
it worked.
I'm like, I'm a mechanical engineer. This applies.
I will click on this.
So yeah, the first thing they go on to say is that mechanical engineers are needed in the farming sector because we drive innovation and efficiency in the farming practices, and we do that by enhancing productivity and sustainability. So yeah, we need to have a sort of resilience to climate change because these things are happening, so 100%. We as engineers need to apply our minds and find solutions so that our processes are, resilient. So some of the challenges that we're facing in the agricultural sector that we mentioned previously are water scarcity, soil. I mean, we mentioned we get like about a half of the rainfall, global rainfall
of the average annual
whatever. So I mean, water scarcity is a big one. Also, soil degradation. We need to know how to keep our soil healthy, and then also climate change. So yeah, one of the big things that mechanical engineers have contributed is the mechanization of farming operations. So that's using things like machines and tractors, and this allows us to increase production and cultivate larger land areas with less time and effort. So, I mean, that's how we're going to reach the numbers, is we're going to have these things. And then we use a technique called precision agriculture, and that's where we're using things like GPS and sensors, and we're optimizing the field level management. So we're using sensors and stuff to know what's the state of our crops, and then it allows us to distribute resources more effectively. So instead of just putting fertilizer everywhere, maybe you say, okay, well, that part of my crop needs more than that part. Okay, so I'm going to divert. So it just becomes more efficient, less wasteful. And then another thing is, where we've contributed is irrigation systems. So there's something called drip irrigation, and it's an advanced irrigation system that delivers water directly to the plant roots. And by doing it this way, we minimize evaporation and runoff, and we also conserve water and ensure efficient usage. So we end up using less water and making sure that none of it's wasted, which I think is very important. And then there's and then also automated irrigation systems. So this falls under that precision agriculture, where you have maybe a water moisture sensor inside the soil at different locations, and when it detects that the soil moisture is not lacquer,
it will automatically turn on.
Then it will automatically turn on, and then if it's too much, then it will turn off, and what. And then the cool stuff is now we're using smart farming technology. So we're implementing drones, and it gives you like an overhead image and data recognition and that kind of cool stuff, and then it allows us to monitor crop health. And then I don't know how, but they can analyze the soil as well, and then also it aids with pest management. So and then also automated farming machinery like self-driving tractors and robotic harvesters, and and what's nice about that is they can operate continuously, and it reduces the physical burden on farmers.
So it makes a lot of sense, man. I think just on your drones point, I've spoken to, I can't remember who it was, but like we get obviously some inquiries from farmers sometimes. A lot of them use the drones and stuff for security. I think this is what people forget again, like going from like you in the US, you're in a US office. Like people forget, like, do you remember like it was a year or two ago, all those farm murders going on where they wanted to kill all the farmers and stuff. Obviously you would know with Alette's parents as well, like security in South Africa is a big thing. Like even if you're a farmer with the best intent, like a lot of our stuff is going to be used to monitor security, things like that. And then, so that was just my point on drones. I've heard a few guys using the drones as a security thing. Even the security companies now have their own private drones for agriculture. And then, again, at university level, we were never given a talk on agriculture. Like most guys who will listen to the podcast now, this will be their first like introduction into, as a mechanical engineer, there's a place for me in agriculture, right? Again, a little gap there for the universities. We're doing God's work. That's what I feel.
Do you remember there was a guy in varsity? I don't know if I should say his name.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Tell me the thing first, then we can decide.
I remember I asked him one day, like, where do you see yourself going? I asked him like that type of a question, and he was like, his dream is to just be on a farm. He just wants to be a farmer, studying mechanical engineering with us, but he just wants to be a farmer.
And did we denigrate the guy? Did we say, what is wrong with you? Even though we should have been supporting him.
No, I don't think I can't remember how we reacted, to be honest. But I think we were like, well, sounds like a peaceful life, man.
Yeah, man, sounds like a joel. And then we were like, let's get on with our own cuck. I think
you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, no, 100%. I think that the bigger thing we just want to put across, obviously, is there's a space for guys in agriculture, and agriculture is very diverse. You get from like the huge commercial farms all the way down to the little small holdings, and there's a place for a mechanical engineer along that whole spectrum. I mean, if you just look at water, like half our course is pumps and Bernoulli's equation and pipe work and stuff like that. There's a place for us there. I think that's the point we're trying to get across.
And also like that whole the sensor precision in
sensors are awesome, man. Yeah. There's so many when I was doing the little thing just to add the few startups, so many startups using AI and this system with sensors on the ground and drones in the air, and there's so much space for innovation. But yeah, I think since we talked about this now, we've gone from why we need food supply, sustainable, then we've gone into mechanical engineers where we fit. Now let's talk about the sustainable part, Mr. Unselal. What makes agriculture sustainable versus not sustainable?
Okay, so for an agricultural operation to be considered sustainable, it needs to meet 4 criteria. It needs to be productive, it needs to be profitable, it needs to enhance the quality and abundance of natural resources, and it needs to enhance the quality of life for the surrounding communities. And all of that makes sense. If the farm, if the farm's not productive, it's not producing, it's not making money, and therefore it's not really helping.
It will fail. Yeah.
If it's not profitable, they can't continue the next year. If it's not enhancing the quality and abundance of natural resources, you're going to run out of resources. And if it's not enhancing the life of the community, then who are you doing it for?
Who are you there for?
So to reach that 4 criteria, they focus on things like biodiversity, soil health, ecological pest management, and water conservation. And we'll get a bit more into like different methods, and according to those focuses, they've set up certain goals of sustainable agriculture. So the first one is conservating water. How do we make sure that as we're farming, we're making sure that our water supply is sustainable? Then how do we reduce the use of fertilizers and pesticides? That's where the organic stuff comes in. How do we promote diversity in crops and ecosystems? And how do we maintain stability in farms? And how do we help farmers improve their techniques and quality of life? Because changing is hard. I mean, how many times have you heard the phrase, "We've done this for 15 years, why would I do something different now?" How many times have you heard that?
It works so, many a time.
When I was looking up, okay, what are the different sustainable practices? The one that really caught my eye is cover crops. Have you heard about cover crops? And what they are?
No. I would like to be educated. What is a cover crop?
Okay, so a cover crop is when you plant something on your where you would have your field at the time of year when you would normally not have anything there. So maybe from the months of I don't know these things, I'm just making an example here. Maybe from the months of January to June, you're growing something, but from July to December, it's not the season for that crop. You're growing a different thing, but it's specifically, so when you're growing something to harvest and sell it, it's called a cash crop. A cover crop is not a cash crop. It's not meant to be sold. The whole point of a cover crop is to maintain the quality of the soil and to prevent things. So the benefits of cover crops is it improves your soil health. So cover crops improve soil structure, they boost organic matter and enhance nutrient cycling. Erosion control, they reduce water and wind erosion, protecting the topsoil. There's also moisture retention, so cover crops help retain water in the soil, and that's critical during dry spells. There's also for pest and weed controls. They attract beneficial insects and suppress weeds, reducing pesticide needs. And there's also livestock integration. So what's cool about a lot of these cover crops is you can actually let your cattle graze on them. So it's kind of serving a double purpose there. And then climate resilience as well. So the cover crops support year-round soil health, essential under changing environmental conditions. So you can't just plant anything in your soil to have your. So they said that there's 3 main types of plants that they use. So they use like legume species, and they're good for adding nitrogen to the soil. So they extract nitrogen from the air and they put it into the soil. And then you get grass species, and they're good to control soil erosion and control weeds. They also improve nutrient cycling, and they also do a bit of carbon sequestration. And they improve soil structures as a result of soil compaction. So because as you know, if the ground gets too hard, it's difficult for the roots to propagate. And then brassicas, I don't know if I said that right, brassicas, and they're used they're used to reduce compaction and increase soil structure through increased levels of organic material, and they do biofumigation and they recycle nutrients, and they also suppress disease and control weeds. So it's really cool. So I
only see benefits.
Yeah, that's basically what they were saying. Is that like
it's like, why don't more people do this?
Yeah, so they did. So there's a link there, and we'll put the link in the description,
in the show notes. Yeah.
And they were talking about, it was a study done in South Africa, and they said they did winter cover crops, summer cover crops. They also did a cover crop where you plant. So they had a thing of maize, and then about 6 or 7 weeks later, in the maize, they planted, I think it was soy. I'm not sure what it was, but it was something
Whichever
else.
way. Yeah.
So they were saying like there's a trade-off here. So and that's called cover crop integration. So it's when you have your cash crop and then you have your cover crop with that. And they were saying the benefit of that is it maintains the soil like as soon as you plant the cover crop. But the reason why you don't want to plant it too early is because then now your maize is competing with the cover crop for the nutrients.
For nutrients and water.
So there's a bit of a trade-off there.
Yeah.
But then also while if you have a winter crop, then you have a summer cover crop. It keeps in the summer. It keeps the soil nice and wet. It doesn't dry up and things don't die.
Sense,
So and a couple of videos they were all saying that like it improves the output of the farm. Like it's a little bit of an investment because now you have to plant something new. It's a little bit more work.
Some different things.
But the benefits that all the studies were saying that the benefits far outweigh the effort you put in. Let me just.
It's obviously it's like a matter of education, I would assume at this point. Education and getting the guys to actually change their process now, which we all know. To change a human being is another story altogether.
Yeah, so I'm probably taking this out of context. So they did something called a composite risk mitigation index.
Yes.
Okay, and it's a score out of 100. I don't know exactly what it means. And they said that when they used summer cover crops and winter cover crops, also they used soya. That's where they planted with the crop, with winter cover crops, and then that you got about 95.8 risk mitigation.
Sure, that's insane. Eh?
So compared to conventional tillage and soya with maize, you get about 43.8%. So like they were basically saying like it's something farmers can do in the short term that will give you long term benefits, and you'll get benefits from the get go. You'll get short term benefits and long term benefits. So like I don't know. When I was reading this, I was like, why isn't this like a regulation thing?
Do it more. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. But maybe I don't understand enough of it. But yeah, so basically the idea is when you're not growing your cash crop, you're using cover crops to maintain your soil and to replace certain nutrients in your soil so that when you plant the next one, it's a much better process. So yeah,
makes sense.
And then other things that they do, other sustainable, are like rotational grazing and crop rotation. Those so the one thing I read, they were saying that a good crop rotation process includes cover crops, and then things like rotational grazing. So don't let your cows only eat from one field, move them around, maintains things. Also use locally adapted breeds because plants that grow in this weather will probably do better in this weather than plants that don't grow in this weather.
Yeah, fair.
And then lower use of tillage and chemical inputs as much as possible. So those are all sustainable things. And then, so that's pretty much the thing I found about on sustainable agriculture. But I see you have something interesting here called agroforestry.
I've got something interesting for you. I think what we want to put across here is, firstly, we're not farmers or botanists or anything, so don't get in the comments and tell us we're idiots, because we know we're idiots.
Yeah.
The second thing is, like, we don't think that these are silver bullets. It's not like if you move over to, cover crops, all our problems are solved, right? It's going to be a combination of a whole bunch of things. And as we've seen in starting this podcast and just being engineers, a lot of the time, like you say, it's not a freaking technical thing. It's a political thing. It's a money thing. It's a people thing. It's the community doesn't want you there thing type of thing. So, yeah, I think it's a whole bunch of things together. Sorry, you want to chime in there? We don't think there's one silver bullet.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't think there's one silver. I think where the message we're trying to put across is that there are solutions to these problems, and
that engineers can drive it, right?
Yeah,
it's all about you guys like doing something. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. All right, to my thing now. So a part of like a subset of sustainable agriculture is what's called agroforestry. Now, agroforestry, just like some background, is a very ancient thing. Like I'm sure back then they weren't calling it agroforestry. We just forgot a bit about it. So agroforestry is the act of planting your crops with some trees mixed into the mix. And however you do that is for the farmers thing. I'm sure they know better than us. But the whole idea around it is that you create it's like there's so many, this is again like what you were saying now, there's so many benefits. I can't understand why more people don't do it. So the video, I don't think I shared the video with you, but I'll put it in the show notes as well. I think it was by Daily Planet or something like that. Basically, farmers take their crops, their normal crops, obviously in their lines and whatever the story is. We can go through your video now, Mr. Insula. But basically, you take a whole bunch of trees, you plant them around, and you can use these trees as shade for other crops. So a lot of the time, they'll do this method with things like coffee, because coffee grows in quite a humid environment and it can't take direct sunlight. So often you plant it in a forest, but now you can manufacture your own agricultural forest, if you want to call it that. And then you can grow coffee in the subterranean of the trees. A lot of the things I saw, they use it for chickens and stuff like that, and sheep, smaller animals. They can go in, it shelters them during the day when there's heat. They can go in and forage. Like some of the ancient things that we saw, like people were taking their pigs in, because there were often trees that produce nuts and acorns and stuff like that. They would take their pigs in to eat there, so you're not shipping in other types of feed for your pigs. You just release them into this agroforest, and they can feed and do their thing in the day. They're protected from the sun. They're protected from predators. There's a whole bunch of flippin' advantages to this. So that's the sort of the method. You plant a bunch of trees in and about your farm, and then you can use that for a whole bunch of things. So some of the benefits here, let's go through just some bullet point list here. You reduce land use, so which is, you think it's a bit funky, right? Because now you're planting stuff where you could plant other stuff. But most of the time, the land you're using for agroforestry was never meant to be farmed on anyway. So you're basically planting trees like in between lines of your crop. Reduce use of fertilizer, because obviously trees shed their bark and their leaves and stuff. So you get a bit of natural, they say biomass a lot of biomass on the ground, things like that. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Obviously trees, they take greenhouse gas emissions out of the air. Reduces air erosion. This is one of the biggest factors that the guys talk about, and this was a lot in that video that you sent me. Like the fact that if you have a line of trees, it's naturally going to reduce wind coming through and eroding the soil where your crops want to grow. Increased biodiversity. You've got more plants, you've got more trees, you've got more land in use, so you're going to get a lot more insects, a lot more bees, a lot more birds, things like that. Better water quality. Trees are very good at filtering water as it goes down into the water table. It can aid in maintaining constant temperatures. This was also a thing. So like coffee, I'll use coffee as the example here. Coffee is very sensitive to changes in temperature. So having a canopy of trees over them creates a very constant temperature at the bottom. I don't know what you call the bottom where the tree trunks are. I know there's different levels to it, but it creates a very constant temperature and a very constant humidity, which is what coffee likes. So if you have a crop that's very sensitive to changes in temperature, trees make a lot of sense for it. You'll see there my nice little picture there. That's a vineyard in Cape Town where they've started.
So we're doing this in South Africa?
We're doing this in South Africa already. I don't think it's that, like we even have a whole plan from government. I read one of those Gazette thingy-majiggies. It was a very long document, doesn't say much, very vague, but there is a plan for it apparently. The thing that's nice about agroforestry is a lot of times in engineering, we have these big plans, like for example, hydrogen, and it's going to take so much to get it into place, and then we don't even know if it's scalable or not. Agroforestry is scalable as it stands. It produces actually better crop yields. It's very easy to scale. You just plant trees in between your crops. There's so many benefits. Anyway, another thing is people might think like if you're planting trees, is it going to change how you harvest crops? Like you have big machines and stuff? Not really, because if you're planting crops that require a large like harvester, for example, you'll never be planting the trees in the middle of your cornfield. You'll be planting it around the perimeter, which is stuff you never would have used anyway. So it's not going to really get in the way of harvesting. I might be wrong. I'm not a farmer again, but from the videos and the things I've read, doesn't seem to be much of a problem. There you'll see that picture. Can you see that there, that before and after?
Yeah, so no, that's wild.
This was a project that was done in Brazil, and the farmers were having problems with that piece of land because there's so much water that flows down there. They had so much soil erosion, and they just couldn't figure out how to do it. So they planted a few, and I don't know if it involved a little bit of cover crop. I saw cover crop there, but I didn't know what it was until you explained it to me. So they would have their cash crop was coffee. And they wanted to figure out a way to plant coffee on the side of this mountain. So they planted coffee. There was banana leaves, banana trees. There was a lot of legumes and stuff there. And you can see that in 2 years, they transformed the whole side of this mountain now to something that's green and fresh and continues all year round. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits. Yeah.
So that's when I saw this picture. That's what reminded me of that the green wall.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is very much.
I think let's go into that video a bit. So Damon gave me a nice video of the green wall that they're building between the Sahara and the
Sahara. Anyway, so in a nutshell, we'll put the video in the show notes so
Yes.
people can go watch it. And it's a video by a young man named Andrew Millison. And honestly, it's an amazing video.
Very good video. Very good.
It's a
video.
project done by the UN where they're trying to build what they call a green wall across Africa. And the idea behind it is to prevent the Sahara Desert from expanding into the rainforest, because that's what they don't want. So the idea is that if they can build this green wall across it basically just stops the Sahara Desert from expanding. And what's amazing about it is they're using local communities to do it, and they practicing sustainable farming methods to do this. And it's so far been one of the most successful UN projects to date.
Yeah.
I can't remember 100% what it does, but it's honestly, when I watched that video, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, no, it was awesome, and we'll put some pictures in here as well. So it's stopping the Sahara from expanding into the Sahel, which is it's the Sahel, then it's the savannah, and then it's the rainforest in Congo and all of those places.
Yeah.
So they were trying to stop that expansion. For me, the cool thing was when the guy was like, "We're not doing anything new. Like, this is all stuff we know how to do. It's established. We just forgot it." And that for me is like crazy. Those little U's that they would build. So they build U's along contour lines to catch water. It's a very ancient method in that part of the world, but communities just forgot about it. Isn't that insane?
Yeah. So no, that's really cool.
It was really cool. And one of the big benefits as well that he spoke about was they're actually replenishing the water table, and that soil was hard. When he tapped on it, you could hear how flipping hard that soil was. It's like concrete. And by building these, they dig like little U's where you can catch water. So the water runs down into the U and then it goes down into the water table. He was just saying like how they've managed, how much did they do? Like 300,000 hectares, I think it was, in that video. But they were looking at a 30-hectare thing. So it was really cool. And to see the community again going from when they first went in, the community was like, no, we've done this before, it doesn't work, all of that stuff. And now a few decades later, communities involved in it, they love it, they're getting food from it. Like there's really big possibilities. It was awesome.
It's like one of those things where it's like a net positive for everyone involved.
Yes, yeah. No, and it's wholesome to watch the video, you know?
Yeah.
Just makes me feel good as a human. So yeah, that's Agroforestry. Just a few numbers to give you guys here. If you use it in chicken rearing, so a lot of the stuff I was looking at is chicken rearing. There was one study done, so if you converted about 9% of the land that's dedicated for agriculture in the EU, in Europe, you could decrease CO2 emissions. Now, this is a very big range, I'll give you that, between 2 and 42%. Now, it's a big range because they said they didn't know which part. If it's cattle farm, it's much higher CO2 than, say, you're producing sunflower seeds or whatever. So that's why it's such a big range. But anyway, converting a little bit of it, and we've seen the benefits of this so far. So chicken, just to give you guys an idea of why it's so useful, especially if it's like something like a chicken or a sheep or whatever, a lot of the times, and you would know this best since you worked in the feed industry as well, a lot of the guys are bringing in external feed from a central location, a place producing feed. And a lot of the emissions in rearing a chicken is actually in getting their feed. So it's not saying that we take the feed away, because obviously it has medicines and stuff in it that the chickens need and nutrients like that. But you can take your chickens and take them into this forest where there are berries and plants and fruits and nuts and stuff growing, and they can feed on that. So you shorten the supply chain a lot, and you take away a lot of those emissions. So there's one of the things. It obviously keeps the chickens safe. It keeps them in a cool area. So yeah, a lot of really good positives coming out of this, and it can be used across a wide range of applications. Now we get to the negatives, just because there's always negatives in these things.
Yeah, there's always a trade-off.
There's always a trade-off. Obviously, if you use the trees that you planted now for your agroforest, if you use it as firewood, sort of defeats the purpose, because now you've taken all that CO2 out and now you're burning it again. So, I mean, not good, all right? Then the other thing is there's obviously a cost to this. So in the first year of establishment, obviously you're planting very small trees, very young trees. It takes a lot of labor to get those trees established, to make sure they're looked after. It's expensive to do. But after the first year, if you can get through that period, the trees start to grow exponentially and they sort of fend for themselves. So yeah, another thing as well is trees can't be planted in all conditions. So like if it's a very rocky mountain, like the trees won't have any soil to get established in. So there are limitations to it. It's not a one size fits all. You need to take it as you do. But I think for South Africa, where we have lots of very long, flat pieces of land, I think it could really be an interesting avenue to at least look at. Do you agree with me, Mr. Hunsela?
Yeah, I 100% agree.
100%
Especially agree with the
agree.
fact that we must be sustainable.
We must be sustainable, right? So yeah, the guys, that's agroforestry for you. I did find a few startups for you if you want to have a look at what I found. We can go through these quickly. So a startup in Cape Town, actually very interesting, started in 2017. It's called Inseco. So they produce insect-based protein and animal feeds. So obviously from insects. I don't know what they're using here, the black soldier fly. So they farm these black soldier flies, and instead of shipping in maize and wheat and stuff and making that type of what do they actually use for the protein in normal animal feed? Do you remember? Were you ever a part of that?
Meal.
Bone meal. There we go. Okay,
I would see some of the recipes.
Ingredients and stuff. Yeah. Okay, bone meal. So they obviously supplementing bone meal here for the insect protein. And they seem to be doing well. They've been alive since 2017. They founded, they're in Cape Town. So yeah, this is Inseco, a startup in Cape Town looking to revolutionize the protein market for animal feed. Then a few ones, RoboVision. These guys have raised so much money. Gee whiskers. $42 million this year alone in March of 2024. They've raised $60 million overall. And they have again, AI. I'm not exactly sure. Their website's very vague, but it looks like they help robots involved in agriculture to just be more efficient, to train them, to make them recognize things better. So yeah, really cool. They have lots of fancy sounding words, 3D deep learning technology, modernizing industry. But yeah, they've raised a lot of money. I think that's the main point of this. Then Oishi, you must actually go watch this video, that little link there. They're really cool. I feel like it's over the top, but they've raised a lot of money. $184 million they've raised. They were founded in 2017. They're based in New Jersey in the USA. And their main thing is they grow expensive crops. So they'll grow things like strawberries, berries, things like that. And you should see, go watch the video in your free time. I'll put it in the show notes as well. They've got like a wall of strawberries that are grown inside. And then they have these cool robot arms that go and they assess if the strawberry is ready to be picked, and the robot arm picks it. Hey?
Oh,
How fancy is that? It seems
sounds
like two...
When I first saw that name, I thought that was going to be like a Japanese company.
I also thought so. I think the founder's Japanese, so flip. I don't know, but they're very fancy, very bougie. Like even the punnet that the strawberries come in is not like a normal punnet that you buy. It's very fancy. So yeah, I think they're doing interesting work. If you're a mechanical engineer, I think that could be a really fun place to work. So yeah, that's the startups to watch out for. And I think that's sustainable farming in a nutshell, Mr. Hunsela. Do you want to wrap us up here? What's your final thoughts here on sustainable farming?
Yeah, my final thoughts are, I think when one thinks about agriculture, they don't think about engineering. But there's really a lot of things that engineers can do to help agriculture and being sustainable and all of these things. And it's whether it's just managing the processes or doing these fancy sensor precise things to monitor the soil and things like that. I mean, that's stuff we can get involved in to do and to really improve it as a whole.
Yeah,
I don't know if you agree.
100%. Yeah, no, I think for me to wrap up with, it's so interesting to see how the agricultural sector, it's such an ancient sector, but there's still so much we can do, so much old things that really worked very well and were good for biodiversity and stuff like that. And we've just forgotten. And it's nice to see people going and just taking it simply, saying, listen, if we plant a few more things here, we can increase yield like this. We can get the community involved. It's really, it makes my heart, it makes me a bit emotional. I feel like human beings have hope. So yeah, I think there's a lot of space for mechanical engineers. I think we need to make a lot more space at university level to tell guys, listen, agriculture, it's actually an area where we need engineers. So I think there's space there. Again, not one silver bullet. It's going to take a lot of effort. And I think, it's going to take a bit of time, but there's definitely hope, especially for South Africa, since we're such a big agricultural producer. And that is my final thoughts on that, Mr. Hunsela. Should we move into the regulars, permissioning to bitch? Do you have things to bitch about?
I'm sure I do, but nothing springs to mind right now.
Ugh, no, man. I'm the one who will listen to your bitching.
I know, man.
You know it. Okay, can I lead you off with my bitching?
Yeah. Lead me off with your bitching. Normally when I hear you bitch about something,
then you can be... So are we good for each other or bad for each other?
I would say we're good.
I would say so as well. So, as everyone knows, we are running Soweto Marathon next week. As my body knows, I'm running Soweto Marathon next week. But no one told my foot this. Now my foot's fucked up, and I'm really scared because I have a week. I have a week to heal, and it's not like bad. Like actually, I was walking a bit on it today. We went to Red Play with the dogs as well. It's tender, but I think it's getting there. But now, this little foot setback has now made me not be able to feel confident in my tapering. So now I feel like I'm going to get there and not have run for 2 weeks because I'm letting my foot heal. But I'm going to go all out, man. So my bitching is my foot needs to listen to me, and it's the same foot that got hurt last time. So there's clearly something I'm not doing right. So anyway, that's my bitching. My body's giving up on me a week before the marathon.
Yeah. I would say,
lekker.
For me, I'm just glad my shins seem to be in a stable position now.
You've come out strong, man. You've come out strong. You're ready to go.
I was like, especially those first 2 weeks, there was a deep fear about my shins. Now it's just the normal feels like, will I be nutritioned well? Will my legs hold out for the full 42 kilometers? They will, but
you've got no choice. You've got no choice. Yeah,
I've given myself it. But yeah, no. Looking forward to it though.
Yeah, no,
recommendations, Mr. Double.
Are we skipping straight into recommendations? No, not this week. Hey, I've been sort of offline, off world. So yeah, nothing new in my life at the moment. You?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got 2 movies that I would recommend.
Give us
the first one. It's fairly recent. It's called The Wild Robot, and it's very much like a Pixar. Think about WALL-E. It's very much.
Okay. What's the premise?
And so the premise is it's this robot that gets into the wild, like it gets stranded on this island, comes away, and it's one of those like help robots where give me a task and I'll do the task and whatever. And then
Pedro Pascal
this robot
is a voice in this. Did you know that? Do you know who Pedro Pascal is? Yeah. Can you believe it? He's Fink.
Yeah.
If that means anything to you. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so anyway, it's this robot, and then she finds this gooseling, and because she ends up getting attacked by a bear, and then she falls on a nest and wipes out the whole family. But then ends up finding this egg, and then somehow gets the task to raise this goose. So she has to teach this goose how to eat, how to fly, how to swim, all of this stuff. And then it just goes through the life story of this goose. And
so quite wholesome.
It's very wholesome. Is it? Like you'll cry.
Do you want to hear what the Rotten Tomato score is?
Sure.
It's actually ridiculous. Do you want to guess?
What's it out of 10?
You don't know are you not a Rotten
Tomato? I know Rotten
Tomato. Anyway, it's a percentage. It's out of 100.
80%?
And you get from critics and from the audience. 98% from critics and the audience.
No, it was a good movie.
98%. Really, that's ridiculous. Okay, no, that's definitely going on my list. Okay, yes. Yeah. And Whitebird.
And the Whitebird, yeah. So that's a movie that Alette and I watched last night. It was it's about this kid, and he's at school, and he's a bit of a mislick oak, and he goes home, and he's like, and then you find out that he got kicked out of his old school because he was bullying someone. Okay. And then his grandmother is there, and then his grandmother grew up during World War II, and she was in the school, and it follows her how the Nazis came and tried to abduct all the Jews in her town. But then there was this one boy who he's got polio, and he gets bullied a lot, and so he helps her escape the school, and then and he basically saves her life, and it follows like their relationship and whatnot.
Or is it a fiction?
I'm not sure if it's a true story. I think it's based on a true story. I don't know if it is true, but it was a very good movie, but it was very sad. Man.
99% from the audience. So yeah, this is also going on the list. Yes, you're coming out hot with recommendations, eh? Gee, whiskers, man.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
That's pretty much it. All right, sweet, guys. Then we're going to end off there. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you guys want to get into contact with us, as always, you can hit us up on email. It's highlevelpodcasts@gmail.com. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram. It's @highlevelpodcasts. Guys, feel free. Follow us, friend us, send us messages, send us memes. We will respond to you because our podcast is still small enough that we have nothing else to do. So we will respond. We will respond to you guys. Thank you guys so much for everyone who listened all the way to the end. You guys are awesome. We appreciate you. This wouldn't be possible without you. So thank you so much for supporting us. And guys, I hope you have an awesome week. We will catch you after we have run 42.2 kilometers and have become superior beings. Thank you guys so much for that. And we will see you in the next one.
Have a lekker one.